Hello there, fellow zombie slayers. My name is Stanley557. Some of my most popular videos involve long, in-depth looks at every single Call of Duty Zombies entry. But while working on that BO6 review, it got me thinking, why not challenge myself and do the opposite of that, and attempt to review every single map in just 1 minute or less? So that's what we're here to do. So if you've been following along, let's say it one last time. This is my review of every single Call of Duty Zombies map in 1 minute or less. Nacht and Toten laid the groundwork for the COD Zombies franchise, and its contributions cannot be understated. It wears its references on its sleeves, and uses atmosphere and slow pacing to engage the audience in a whole other world, completely dissonant from its campaign and multiplayer counterparts. Watching the undead rise from the fog is iconic, and coming off of the campaign, it's the game's greatest surprise. The map design is rather bare bones, but for an introduction, it more than gets you settled in, with death being an expectation that can only be challenged for so long. And then there's the characters, who are nothing before Marines that eventually become slaughtered. Nacht excels at allowing the player to fill in the blanks with what is so little in the map, and it's so easy to see why it got the whole series started in the first place. Verruckt is chapter 2 of the COD Zombies pantheon. The map's greatest strength is its horror and how it evolves Nacht's gameplay loop, with its greatest innovation being the perk system. Coming off of Nacht, Verruckt challenges players with greater abilities but tighter map design. By saving your points, you can give yourself increased health, rate of fire, reload speed, and player revive time. These abilities alone vastly improve the player experience, and with them, greater gameplay feats can be achieved, while overall giving moment-to-moment interactions a sense of progression and risk versus reward. And of course, there's its horror. Verruckt invites players to the world of the German Asylum, a nightmare realm with an atmosphere that would be ruined if I tried to describe why it works. And when put together, you have a difficult map that wants to see the player get back up no matter how many times that they're knocked down. Having honed the player's skills in Verruckt, Numa goes for a different approach. In the third map in the COD Zombies pantheon, Numa takes players outdoors and utilizes more expansive map design and weaponry to expand the scope of what is possible for the series and how it leads up to its finale in Riese. The Wunderwaffe is a powerful lightning-imbued rifle that always kills 10 zombies no matter the round, and if used effectively, can be utilized to reach whatever round the player desires, should they survive that long. Also unique to the scope of the map is the characters. For the first time in the series, Numa takes an active approach to the mystery of its narrative and introduces a full cast of characters, including but not limited to Tank Dempsey, Takeo Misaki, Nikolai Belinsky, and of course, Edward Richtofen. Without this impactful experience, who knows where the game would be today. In the grand finale to World at War, Riese concludes the game and goes out guns blazing on all fronts. The narrative introduces further nuance to Dr. Richtofen and his nefarious schemes. Pack-a-Punch brings a whole new level to your weaponry and changes the way that you play the game. The map design is a complex mix of tight corridors and wide areas, and it paved the way for how future entries would corral and lead players through the environment. And teleporters were perfect additions to the gameplay loop that presented players with new ways to experience map flow. Riese shows mastery over all mechanics and features introduced throughout the year for both the player and the developers. It's clear to see why it stands as an all-time fan favorite even 15 years after it's been released. Also, it introduced the first Easter egg, and that's really cool. Originally being DLC 4 for World at War, Kino Toten is the perfect launch map for Black Ops 1. And just like Riese, catches players up on all of the advancements that the series has made since Nacht, including perks, level design, characters, scope, and Pack-a-Punch. Taking place 20 years after the events of Riese, the Ultimus crew come face to face with the fallout of World War II and the experiments of Group 935. But instead of giving the audience direct answers to many narrative threads, Kino uses this as an opportunity to create further atmosphere and get you engrossed in the world of the undead with very many and new different narrative threads. In addition to all of this, the map features an all-new wonder weapon and enemy type. The Thunder Gun blows away hordes at a heavy cost, and the Nova Crawlers change the way that you fight and strategize your movement. And above all else, the map is fun. It's easy to see why it's considered one of the greats. Taking place in the Pentagon, 5 brings with it an all-new celebrity crew and enhanced map design that takes the foundation of Riese and Verruckt and adds all new layers on top of them that force you to think on your feet or die trying. 5 is an experience all about trade-offs, release valves, and decision making, and the map excels at all of these in spades. Then there's the amazing cast, who you can really tell are giving it their all and having a blast doing it. And of course, there's the Pentagon Thief, a one-of-a-kind encounter that rewards you for good teamwork and a little bit of luck. And finally, how could I forget the unique map design and the off-putting environment that never quite lets you feel at ease, and the amazing movement tech that you can pull off in the labs by jumping through the windows. And then there's the wonderful pig who you should never kill. 5 is another classic experience, but can be bogged down by its intense mechanics and difficulty. It's definitely a good sister map to Kino. In contrast to its previous counterpart, Ascension is full of wide open spaces, multiple wonder weapons that are actually good, and new enemy types that further disrupt gameplay. Ascension is a map I have a major soft spot for, but when I really break down its mechanics, it's bogged down by an ugly aesthetic, simplistic setup, and annoying special enemies. But first, there's the good, which includes the first actual Easter egg quest and expanded in-map narrative, lunar landers, and the introduction of 2 perks, PhD and Stamina Up, with the map doing a stellar job at giving players more loadout options and choices. And of course, there's the wonder weapons, including the Thunder Gun, Matryoshka Doll, and the all-new Gersh device. If I'm just looking for a good time with friends, Ascension more than fits the bill, but its scope for what it introduces cannot be understated for the series, despite its numerous flaws. To continue on with Black Ops 1's trends of hazards, Call of the Dead introduces a second celebrity crew to the undead, the map features the largest playable space to date at the time, a solo and co-op specific main quest, 2 unique wonder weapons, and the man himself, George Romero, as an undead warlord hell-bent on killing players by any means necessary. Call of the Dead is a premium experience that challenges players at every turn, and unlike 5, it uses many of its mechanics to actually give players risk versus reward and agency in every single one of their decisions. It also builds an incredibly unique atmosphere, but isn't the greatest crowd pleaser despite these pros. The map is built entirely around the George mechanic, which is both what makes it so unique, but also so detested by players even today. And taking him down is just as gratifying as it is annoying when he immediately returns. Call of the Dead is a map that aims to grow with the player, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Often considered the first bad map in the franchise, Shangri is a sandbox nightmare that presents a bunch of different tools to the player, plants them in the middle of a time travel adventure, and lets them run wild. The map is characterized by its beautiful setting, stunning but difficult to access main quest, and tight level design. Everything has the possibility to be used to your advantage, but can also kill you, which is probably the map's main selling point. Spike traps can block zombies, but leave you stuck in them. Napalm zombies can temporarily create fire traps, but kill you as well. The 3179 JGB-215 is a fantastical horde clearer, but leaves you susceptible to various strikes, and the egg can grant each and every player a permanent perkaholic should you complete it 4 times. It's one of the most unique maps in the series, and an experience the rest should have shot for. Out of This World is the perfect way to describe Moon. Jimmy Zielinski's run of zombies is characterized by unique mechanics and the previously brought up risk versus reward of gameplay, and Moon shows off these qualities constantly. You have the ability to pressurize and depressurize nearly every area of the map, utilize the hacker for its insane effects, but risk no longer being able to use the wider areas of the map without risk of downing due to air loss, and in spawn, you can either risk getting Jug, Speed Cola, or Pap early, but have the potential for an early game down. And then there's the map's ending, which completely jumps the shark despite some of its cooler narrative moments. These mechanics are incredibly in-depth, but force players to constantly monitor the play space, their ammo, and many of their resources, on top of the already tight map design, leading to sometimes plenty of unfair downs. But despite these issues, Moon has always been one of my favorite experiences in the series. Oh boy, what do I say about this map? Tranzit is the series' first major blunder, and that is mostly due to its bloated map design, ugly aesthetic, and overcomplicated mechanics, and a strict gameplay structure that punishes players who don't follow it. The map fails to balance risk versus reward in favor of an unfair challenge. Tranzit is everything wrong with Zielinski's gameplay philosophy, and needed a tighter focus on survival rather than scale in order to be a fun experience. For example, the buildable mechanic is really cool, but wouldn't be improved upon until Mob of the Dead. Being able to only hold one part at a time makes the process cumbersome, especially for buildables like the jet gun and the nav card table. And finally, there's the characters, which are lampooned American stereotypes and unfunny ones at that. Tranzit is a flawed experience, but despite its issues, its chaos hits the right spot for many players and is a beloved ugly duckling in the community. Boy, Nuketown is one of those zombies maps. Taking place at the same time as Moon, Nuketown pits CDC and CIA members against hordes of the undead. Unlike the usual zombies formula, Nuketown's main gimmick is how the player can obtain perks and Pack-a-Punch. By pushing through the rounds, Jug, Double Tap, Speed Cola, Quick Revive, and Pack-a-Punch randomly appear on the map one at a time, with all machines being available at round 20. I despise this feature, but understand how it can shake up gameplay and force you to strategize differently than most maps in the entire series. And it's cool how at round 25, Richthofen takes control of the undead, and the map ends with the rockets from the moon facility hitting the map, which is incredibly cool. Nuketown is not a map I'm a huge fan of, but as a bonus map, it more than does its job. Die Rise is a map I'm extremely mixed on. On one hand, you have a map design that flourishes in players creating their own pathways, one that gets better the more you learn about it. An overambitious project that takes verticality to the next level for the Undead franchise. On the other hand, you have a miserable maze of death meant to make you go down constantly. Die Rise is an experience that gets worse before it gets better, and that can be a barrier to entry for many players. But for those who do get past it, you have some amazing wall buys, groundbreaking level design, a skill-based perk, and a setting like no other. Die Rise is one of Treyarch's greatest enigmas, and oh yeah, there's still that terrible crew, and a boring main quest that seeks to waste your time rather than be fun. Mob of the Dead pushes the envelope of what was possible for Call of Duty Zombies. The map engages players in an incredibly rich world full of side Easter eggs, passion, and a consistent vision. On top of that, you have a star-studded cast and a narrative disconnected from the insanity that we've been experiencing for the past 4 years at that point. Mob of the Dead begs players to get engrossed into its unique world of the undead, and all of this doesn't even account for the amount of content and unique gameplay mechanics present, including Afterlife and the revamped buildable system. If I had to give the map any complaints, it'd be the flip-flop between how difficult the early game is to how late the end game is, but that dichotomy does present how powerful you can truly become through progression and actually playing the map and having fun. Mob of the Dead is a one-of-a-kind experience and a true all-time classic in the Zombies catalog. In the original conclusion to the Aether storyline, Buried pits our motley crew of misfits in a time-traveling adventure trapped underground and buried in a western town. Buried is Jimmy Zielinski's swan song, and the map goes all out being the ultimate sandbox adventure that is notable due to its creativity, well-made level design, and exquisite theming. Buried, like Mob before it, tries to be more than just another zombies map. Fun is completely dictated by what you choose to do and how you choose to do it. You can go for a perkaholic, have Leroy open the whole map and build all the buildables, go for the wonder weapon, create unique holdout locations, lock the box where you see fit, and make the experience your own. While the map lacks risk in many of its mechanics, it makes up for it with creativity and attention to detail. And then there's that main quest and narrative ending, which just kind of is there. Buried is the last map of its kind, and makes for the perfect conclusion to OG Zombies. Being the first real stepping stone for the new era of zombies next to Mob of the Dead, Jason Mundell and his team have handcrafted a hardcore experience that reevaluates what zombies is and what it became in Origins. Featuring the return of the original 4 characters, the map's grand narrative is on an unprecedented scale, and the gameplay takes new swings at old mechanics while introducing players to all new ones at the same time. The map is constantly changing, throwing new threats, rewards, and wonder weapons in the player's face, seeking to end things off on a high note before the next long hiatus. And the experience excels in progression in a way that we've never seen before. Origins is unforgettable, but will constantly punish new players that don't learn all of its ins and outs, and guides are a must, which isn't something that felt required beforehand. But all in all, Origins defined the beginning of a new era of zombies, and who knows where we'd be without it. Being the first map not developed by Treyarch, the Sledgehammer and Raven co-production known as Exo Zombies has some big shoes to fill, and if you ask me, it really fails to deliver a memorable experience. Taking place in a whole new world, Outbreak and Exo Zombies is defined by its rudimentary approach to the zombies formula, and its story and world feel derivative of other undead media, greatly missing the charm that made Treyarch Zombies unique in the middle of the 2010 zombies craze. As for the map itself, Exo Zombies is a limited experience that doesn't properly utilize its main mechanic, the exosuit, to great effect, and suffers greatly because of it. The level design feels curated for a Treyarch game, and the infection bonus rounds are a waste of time that feel reminiscent of the vermin rounds from Liberty Falls, where you stand in a corner until the round is over. And the main quest, while short, is nothing special besides its second non-canon ending. Outbreak is a map that completely misses the mark for me. In another infamous map for this series, Infection is seemingly everything wrong with zombies, including a nonsensical main quest, punishing survivor escorts, deadly toxic rounds, and an expensive map progression. If I have to give the map any leeway, it would be in its better approach to map design and the fantastic way in which the map better utilizes the exosuit, with each major zone being like a wide open circle to fly around through. Then there's the Magnetron, which is a terrible microwave wonder weapon that I swear has to be a joke. And then there's the characters, who are just as one note as they were in Outbreak. But this time around, we have the Sentinel operator, Lennox, played by Bruce Campbell, providing comms and survivor rounds, which is funny considering how Cold War and BO6 utilize their extra characters in the exact same way. And don't even get me started on the main quest, including hunting for 4 pieces of meat in 37 distinct locations, and they all look like this. Infection is just like its namesake, and oh boy, I need some hydrogen peroxide to get rid of it. Carrier is Exozombies' third experience. It features a close quarters map design, multiple new grenades, perks, and wonder weapons, and features human AI opponents and a difficult main quest. Overall, Carrier is a map I should despise, but honestly, I love the way it's set up. Its gameplay is rather hectic, and any moment could be your last. But if you're engaging in the main quest, you are presented with a terrible sequence that is only fun on a masochistic level. And then there's the Atlas Strike Team, which are a fun encounter reminiscent of the Templar rounds from Origins, but with greater downside should you fail to stop them. Now, as much as I like the map, it sadly doesn't benefit from Exo's weak art design and poor enemy balancing, especially with the EMZ making close quarter training more punishing than it should be. Carrier is a weird glimmer of hope in Advanced Warfare, but would have benefited from a team with more experience or a smaller scale. Descent feels like another disappointment in Exozombies' catalog. I feel the map has features it hardly wants to take advantage of, while still not changing any of the mechanics that didn't work throughout the year, including multipap, infection rounds, EMZs, map design, and solo balancing. But I do want to give the map praise for its 2 narrative boss fights, even though both take up a round and are mandatory every time you play. Double feature mode, which is a cute novelty, doesn't need to exist in a mode already as difficult as this one, and the map's location, which is surprisingly the closest we've ever gotten to an Atlantis location in Zombies, doesn't really feel like it's built for that and just feels like a generic Atlas facility given an underwater coat of paint. But for the 4th experience, Descent manages to conclude the Exozombie storyline with the most mediocre energy possible, and comparing it to Riese, Moon, and Origins, it doesn't do enough to make itself stand out. Taking place in the non-distinct Chicago of Morgue City, Shadows of Evil brings unprecedented scale, style, and mystery to the Zombies franchise. Coming off of Origins and Mob of the Dead, the bombastic map takes aspects of both experiences and blends them together while managing to create its own atmosphere and world. There's also the map's star-studded cast and Cthulhu-inspired setting. It has an insane amount of content packed into it, and there's so many different ways to play and utilize beast mode. And how could I forget the music? Jack Wall's score is iconic. If I had to give a criticism, it would be the map's long setup process, which hasn't aged the best in over the past few years, especially because you have to do every single step every single time you want to play the map. But for all that it does, I love Shadows of Evil, and it'll always have a spot at my top 10 favorite Zombies maps of all time. Being a remake of the original Riese, The Giant is a paradoxical chapter in the story that sees the original Aether storyline changing, and our characters trying to save the multiverse, or whatever the actual plot of it is. Unlike its past iterations, The Giant is a bonus map meant to give players more content to play around with around the launch of Black Ops 3, and thus is able to show off the game's more nuanced specific gameplay mechanics, including undead hit speed, the improved Wonder Waff, the Gobblegum system, and the 3-hit down. The Giant's main appeal is its narrative, which does nothing but confuse the player and give them more questions than answers. But as a bonus map, it more than fulfills its role and is a great simple time in case Shadows becomes too much for the afternoon. Now with the premise storyline in full swing, Eisendrache continues the narrative and gameplay direction set forth by Jason Lundell, while pulling from many past experiences like Ascension, Riese, Moon, and most notably, Origins. Eisendrache is a map that kicks off the game's DLC season, and much of Black Ops 3's success can be attributed to it. While you have the returning 4 Wonder Weapon concept, where DE stands out is its main quest, which feels fully integrated into the experience. While it's not something the player has to do, you are rewarded for doing it, and many of its steps are actually fun, replayable, and features Treyarch's first official boss fight. And finally, there's the narrative outro cutscene, which actually forwards the story and leaves players wanting more, which is something unprecedented for the series because Origins' outro cutscene was very confusing and terrible, but to Eisendrache is a premium experience and no one should skip playing it. Zetsubou no Shima sees the Primus crew continue their adventure to save the multiverse by doing stuff that makes no sense. Zetsubou no Shima is a mixed map in the Undead catalog, and if I had to be honest, it's not one of my favorites. Many of its unique gameplay mechanics are cumbersome, and flow is most definitely not the map's strong suit. And then there's the Wonder Weapon, which massively underperforms unless you're using a single specific strat after the boss fight. If there were some positives, it would have to be the Skull non Sapway and the map's outro cutscene, which is still one of the best in the entire series due to its intimate and well-written conversation. But I feel Zetsubou is a map that is missing something it doesn't have, and it's a real shame because I can't exactly pinpoint what it is. But I know for a lot of fans out there, Zetsubou features plenty of fun and replayable content. But personally, it just isn't for me. Gorod Krovi is a map that I adore, and that mainly has to do with its bombastic map presence. You've got this incredible intro cinematic, an amazing main quest that I find difficult yet satisfying to complete, and the theming, while controversial for others, sits right at home with me. I love the fantasy versus future aesthetic, and it oozes throughout the entirety of the map. You have the Mark IIIs and the Shield, the Manglers and Valkyries and the Dragons, you have the Gauntlet of Siegfried, which is the best of both worlds, and you have the Nikolai and Dragon boss fight. It also helps that the map design is fantastic, and the Dragon Ride is such a cool spectacle every time I ride it. And this doesn't even mention the fantastic outro cutscene, further delving into the character of Primus Nikolai and recontextualizing Ultimus Nikolai. I have such a soft spot for these themings, and Gorod more than delivers. In the grand finale to Black Ops 3, Revelations makes just about every mistake that it can, and fails to stick the landing, with its confusing ending due to the game not exactly having a very coherent main narrative. Revelations has plenty of new mechanics and side Easter eggs, but its primary failure lies in its easy difficulty, poor narrative, and reuse of previous locations without any actual reason as to why they should be there. And then there's the main quest, which might be one of the worst in the franchise, created in an effort to make for an engaging YouTube livestream, but terrible upon replay. And finally, there's the arcs of our characters, which have all been fulfilled by the time that Gorod is over, and because of that, the map fails to utilize any of its major players, including Montier the Shadowman, in an interesting way. And for a map that splashes the end at the end of its outro, it's a shame it feels like anything but. For $30, Zombie Chronicles grants players 8 remastered maps. For that value alone, it's absolutely worth the purchase. But how would I review each map? Nacht, Verruckt, and Shino Numa each suck because Pack-a-Punch is locked behind Gobblegums, Kino and Ascension are fine, Origin suffers due to the mud slowing you down, and the Panzer's increased armor to standard weaponry, and Moon is the only one I believe receives an improvement gameplay-wise over the original. Even without the Gobblegums, the stronger weaponry of Black Ops 3 better balances the map's risk versus reward nature, and levels the playing field in a way that rewards skill and mowing through hordes, especially on trips to Area 51. But as a whole package, Zombie Chronicles is a fun experience with friends that shouldn't be looked at as anything more than bonus content. For Infinite Warfare's first endeavor, Zombies in Spaceland knocks it out of the park and becomes an immediate fan favorite. Paying homage to Jimmy Zielinski's era of maps, Zombies in Spaceland defies the year for IW with wacky sandbox-like experiences that don't seek to take themselves too seriously, instead allowing players to define the fun for themselves, and Spaceland exemplifies that. And setting the map in a theme park could not be more ingenious. Seriously, how has this not been tackled before? And how could I forget the features, like the actual arcade, roller coaster, and of course, the Hoff. No expense was spared. If I had to give some criticism, it'd be the map's boss fight and lack of double Pack-a-Punch without completing the egg. But for their first experience, Lee Ross and his team knew exactly what players wanted, and it's easy to see why this map alone stands out among the crowd. In another premium experience for IW Zombies, building off the foundation of Spaceland, Rave in the Redwoods takes the appearance of a 90s slasher movie and integrates many of Spaceland's features into era-specific mechanics, like the coin and claw machine turning into gems and totems. Rave in the Redwoods also features 4 elemental bows, a short but simple main quest, and great aesthetics and map design. Just like Spaceland, Rave sells its locale really well, but there are things that I dislike, including Kevin Smith and the slasher, which ruins the map's gorgeous Wraith mode after round 10. and killing him being locked behind the egg isn't as fun as they hoped it would be. Even if he's impressive, George's slow speed and middling damage made him an impactful threat, but not an overly dangerous and gameplay ruining one. This advice was not taken by the slasher, who can unfairly down players whenever he pleases. But overall, Rave is another map that I love. As a surprise to many, Shaolin Shuffle is not a map that I hate. Its art design is striking, the wonder weapons are surprisingly a lot of fun to use, and before round 20, the map is a ton of fun. Where it begins to fall off for me, however, is the introduction of ninja zombies. These evil creations greatly affect the map's training, and make it an utter nightmare if you don't use melee wonder weapons. And then there's the Easter egg, which is also an utter nightmare. It requires guides up the wazoo, and steps like the I-step really needed another pass in development. And following immediately after it is the word puzzle, which is completely asinine. Overall, Shaolin Shuffle is a mixed bag that has just as many positive qualities as it does negatives, and a greater focus on enemy interactions and unique features like the wonder weapons, and making the main quest fun first would have gone a long way. Attack is IW's fourth and probably most infamous map due to its art design and overall look. Meant to model the 50s B-movies, the map's lighting engine does it no favors, and not enough time was put into properly melding the look into the environment. But all that is to say that I actually quite enjoy many of the map's other aspects, including its enemies, gameplay, and how you scavenge the world to repair different buildables, traps, and the wonder weapon. If it wasn't for the art design and main quest, I'd like this map a lot more, honestly. It truly feels like an improved Tranzit. But then there's the main quest, which I loathe, and feels like a direct response to people saying that Spaceland and Raise Eggs were completed too quickly. Overall, Attack is a surprisingly charming experience, but one that falls just short of something special due to being too ambitious in a game that doesn't support its concepts. And finally, for one of my least favorite maps in this series, The Beast from Beyond fails on just about every account. Unlike Rev, which at least has stunning visuals and content, Beast features a laughably bad enemy roster, a terrible narrative, and one of the worst boss fights in the series. If it wasn't for Director's Cut, much of the map would have slipped into obscurity and infamy. Many of its design decisions don't seem properly thought through, and the excuse that Director's Cut improves it seems to disregard many of its bad gameplay decisions. Then there's all the glitches, which are inexcusable, especially those that appear when you beat the map without Director's Cut. And don't even get me started on the Venom X. And none of this talks about how the cryptids were implemented or the terrible endgame twist that makes no sense. One of the worst maps in the series. At least Tranzit was comically bad. This is just disappointing. Being led by the producer of Dead Space, the Final Reich, and subsequently World War II, is an experience marked by its slow build-up and serious attempt at making COD zombies competent, with an easy-to-follow linear narrative. And I'd say the map pulls this off perfectly. The Tomb of Barbarossa is marked with mystery, and the map pulls off the evil German facility better than any that came before it. The map also features a star-studded cast, and one finally notable enough to mention. There's also the directed Easter egg, which wouldn't come back until Black Ops 6 surprisingly, and is a feature that actually gets players to engage in the main quest. On top of that, there's the true ending, which can only be accessed by completing additional steps in a harder boss fight. Overall, the Final Reich is World War II's best experience, and much of it is in part to its striking world building and key attention to detail. Groston House is a bonus map that serves as both extra content and a prologue to the Final Reich, as if the map couldn't get any better. It serves as an excellent tutorial, and it fits right at home in any other game. And the survival mode version is an extremely fun, close quarters challenge that integrates features like perks, the box, a randomized upgraded box, and is meant to keep you on your toes and force you to try out each and every weapon. How Nacht still doesn't implement stuff like this in each of its 50 iterations is beyond me. Although you can't easily change said perks from the machine, which is annoying. This is easily the best bonus map we've ever gotten, and unlike the Giant, Classified, or Nuketown, it actually comes bundled with the game, which instantly bumps it up a few points in my book. The Darkest Shore is a map many had negative feelings on, and there are plenty of times where I must agree. With its ugly color palette and less saturated colors, it's not exactly a looker compared to other experiences, especially the Final Reich, which just came out before it. But where Darkest Shore excels is its main quest. It's difficult, insane, and has steps that would infuriate most players, but the cherry on top is the boss fight, which is a multi-faced gauntlet meant to push you to your limits. It's easily one of my favorites. Then there's how the egg incorporates other features, including taking down both planes and naval ships and attempting to scorch the island in the hopes of preventing Straub's army from rising further. Sadly, outside of the main quest, the map is rather dull and fails to stand out on its own. Darkest Shore, like Zetsubou, is missing just a little bit more to make it perfect. Maybe not wrapping all the content around the main quest would have helped. In the third map to World War II Zombies, the Shadow Throne is a mixed experience that comes with many of the same pros and cons that are present on the Darkest Shore. The map features fun and creative melee wonder weapons, and the main quest has some insane cinematic flair, especially in the beginning and end of the main quest. But just like the Darkest Shore, outside of the main quest, the map fails to leave a lasting impression, just being another zombies map with not much to call its own. And the map itself is way too small. It doesn't feel like it had the time or resources to fully explore the city of Berlin. And finally, there's the boss fight, which is super cool, but becomes way too much of a bullet sponge and becomes a tad too repetitive by the end of it. Sadly, the Shadow Throne is a map that can't quite compete with its competition, and overall ends up being a very forgettable experience. And let's not forget about that stupid save step. In one of COD's biggest missteps, the Tortured Path is a confused game mode that attempts to shake up the standard gameplay of zombies with fast hardcore action. Split between 3 separate maps, the Tortured Path is an okay game mode but features a terrible main quest that features asinine step after step, and failing to complete specific steps at a specific round turns into a full restart, which isn't present on any other main quest in the series. Included is the admittedly cool Waffenbox mechanic, but on the flip side, you have objective rounds, which range from fun to downright awful, like a round 6 defense. And the abundance of whistlings and bombers is straight up unfair. Then there's the survival map variants, which are a nice reward and make as serviceable experiences that feature plenty of extra little goodies, including the upgraded melee weapons from the Shadow Throne, the secret AC Tesla gun upgrade, and the Sword of Barbarossa, a terrible side mode with some passable survival maps. Definitely not one of their best. Despite having a beautiful setting, The Frozen Dawn is a lackluster conclusion to World War II Zombies. The main quest revolves around its wonder weapons, the map is small, and the setting is garish to put it lightly. It's not that the map isn't creative, but development constraints clearly had a hand in its rough development. The main meat and potatoes is the wonder weapons, which are fun to unlock, but are way too difficult to upgrade. And even when upgraded, they fail to bring a wow factor that wonder weapons are usually known for. And how could I forget the God King boss fight, which is also one of my least favorite in the series. As a map on its own, it fails to stand out, and as a conclusion to World War II Zombies, it rushes to the finish line, and just like the Beast from Beyond, leaves the audience on a cliffhanger that seems to have no direction in which to lead things. Frozen Dawn is a lackluster experience, and it's a shame World War II didn't finish stronger. In one of my favorite experiences, Voyage of Despair manages to present to the player unprecedented scale and the introduction into a completely new world following the ending to Revelations. I love the Chaos lore, the new characters, mechanics, enemy variety, a wonder weapon concept I've been waiting for them to tackle forever, and of course there's the main quest, which is one of my favorites. Also, how could I forget the boss fight, which is an insane encounter against the Serpent of Yggdrasil taking the form of the punctured Eye of Odin, which shoots ice beams and screen nukes. How did we get here from Nacht? I don't know, but I love it. But there are negatives, including the map not incorporating the Titanic nor the Nordic lore for the sake of spectacle with no substance. The map layout can be confusing, and besides the main quest, the map lacks stuff to do outside of side quests, but it still ends up being one of my favorites despite these flaws. Taking place in a Roman Colosseum, 9 represents everything that has changed about the undead game mode since its humble beginnings. It takes place in a Roman arena in 99 BC, where a horde of cultists are attempting to initiate a sentinel trial in the efforts of obtaining the secrets of the ancient world. This map is insane, and it relishes in this environment from the minute you start till the end of the Easter egg, like the boss fight is against 2 war elephants. Usually, I consider spectacle with no substance to be the bane of the series' existence, but 9 manages to deliver on its concepts in a way that feels satisfying and tangible. If there was a complaint, it would have to be with the wonder weapon, and the main quest taking a little bit too long to get set up on. But besides that, it'll always be one of my favorites, and I would love to see Chaos return in full force like this one day. Overambitious is the word I used to describe Blood of the Dead. Taking place in the Broken Cycle after the events of Zetsubou no Shima, Blood of the Dead seeks to explore the entirety of Alcatraz Island, and honestly the experience suffers greatly because of it. The main quest is bloated, the map layout is too large, and it suffers from lack of flow. Despite having more resources than ever, Mob of the Dead represents how sometimes less is more. And this is more than true for Blood, which has some great spectacle, but suffers because of it. Like, I love the catwalk sequence. It was clearly thought of first, and then how to integrate it into the level flow was thought of second. The Magmagat is also a cool wonder weapon, but the Acigat is nerfed to compensate for it, and the side quests are some of the longest in the series, but again, length doesn't always mean fun. And the ending is a tonally confused mess, which is a real shame because at its core, the map is fun to play. In a remake of the original 5, Classified is a map that expands upon the original, while being a prequel to 5, Moon, and Alpha Omega, and a sequel to Shangri-La, Moon, and Blood of the Dead, and takes place in both the normal and broken cycles. How any of that makes any sense is for you to learn. Classified's greatest strength is its atmosphere, being a tonal opposite to the sterile look of 5, with the map being a souped-up lampoon version of the 60s, and it embraces this tone completely. Also included in the maps are extended rooms, an upgraded teleporter system, and Groom Lake, officially linking Shangri-La to Moon. Then there's the story revelations, including Ultimus returning from the Moon, the origins of the Cosmonaut, and the return of Broken Arrow. Classified is a narrative goldmine, and the map perfectly revels in BO4's mechanics, even if the Pentagon Thief isn't present. In a prequel to Voyage of Despair, the final star-studded cast in Zombies history must survive the undead outbreak in Dead of the Night. I love the map's theming, side Easter eggs, and attention to detail. There are secrets oozing out of every corner, and the map's score is near perfection. And also, how could I forget its unforgettable wonder weapon too? But I do have some complaints, mainly involving the map's cast, and the main quest being one of those main quests, where you need to hunt down a billion extremely specific parts and scratch marks down. But I can't deny its cool factor and how it implements unique entities, including spirits, knights, vampires, werewolves, and an homage to Afterlife halfway through the egg. Dead of the Night is not personally one of my favorites, but I know for a fact has resonated with a ton of players over the years. A wonderful experience bogged down by some confusing design decisions. Ancient Evil is style and substance all in one package. Taking place in the middle of a Greek sentinel trial, Ancient Evil excels at crafting this extremely unique world for players to explore. The map features an outstanding main quest, the return of the challenge system from BO3, and a living figure who talks to you throughout the entire map, with the Oracle taking an active role in aiding players and building the world. Then there's the wonder weapons, which are fun to build and upgrade while still being powerful for their relative investment, especially the Charon Gauntlet. I also have to mention the way that the map blends both the light and dark sides of the map. And finally, there's its music, which is firing on all cylinders and creates this incredible cohesion across 3 distinct music genres, an absolute classic in this modern era of the undead. And another blunder for the series, Alpha Omega's greatest weakness is its gameplay, wonder weapons, and failing to understand why a 4 wonder weapon concept works on maps like Origins, but not here. And then you have Jolting Jacks and Nova Bombers, which kill the gameplay loop to add on top of that. But you do have positives, which include music, characters, writing, and narrative. Basically everything besides gameplay, which is a real shame as a video game is only as good as its gameplay first and foremost. But I do want to give the map props for its simplistic yet fun Easter egg, and the boss fight, which reintroduces the Avogadro in a fun way that perfectly parallels figures like Ultimus Richtofen in his pursuit for power. Overall, Alpha Omega is a map that has a defined identity, but an infamous one that is only beloved due to features that aren't its gameplay. In the official grand finale to the original Aether storyline, Toten has the unenviable task of concluding a 10-year-long narrative, and in some ways it accomplishes that, while in others it completely fails, and in a vacuum, it's just generally fantastic. Even though the final map uses the Victus crew of all people, it manages to answer nearly every loose thread, including Jebediah Brown, Harvey Yena, Samantha Maxis, Monty, the Shadow Man, the Duality, and the Elemental Shard, just to name a few. And the end cutscene is a nice send-off to the Ultimate Supremacist characters, but clearly rushes to the finish line, as development wasn't in their favor. But as a map on its own, TOG is an absolute blast and has a ton of things for players to do and explore, but under better circumstances could have been the perfect penultimate experience before the true finale. In the beginning of the new Dark Aether storyline, D Machine is a return to form for the Zombies franchise, and reins in the more bombastic and expensive aspects of Black Ops 3 and 4 for a smaller budget experience that starts out slow, but by the end of it has a fully realized narrative. D Machine's greatest strength is the simplicity and inviting nature, and with 4 elemental die variants, the map attempts to appeal to all and invite a new crowd to the franchise. And then there's the main quest, which is serviceable, but is missing the difficulty that makes these quests enjoyable. And Orlov makes for an amazing emotional core that truly ties together some of the map's lesser features. And finally, besides the intro, there's little narrative expressed, and for being the only map for 2.5 months, it definitely left a lot to be desired, but not bad by any means. Coming right off the heels of D Machine, Firebase Z follows the Requiem Strike team rescuing Samantha Maxis of all people, and we must communicate with both her allies and enemies in order to save her. Firebase Z's greatest aspect is its core gameplay loop and unique defense waves. Pulling from the original tower defense concept planned since World at War, these defense waves have players combat waves of the undead while defending generators. But the real surprise is the Orda encounter past round 30, which is an incredible moment. I love the map's wonder weapon and its cast, including the introduction of the surprisingly charming William Peck and Sergei Ravanov. And then there's the Easter egg, which is sadly pretty lackluster and features an even easier version of the Orda boss from the defense waves. But sadly, at best, Firebase Z is another serviceable experience that doesn't do anything wrong, but doesn't do anything impressive either. Bearing the same name as the map from Exo Zombies, Outbreak is an open-world experiment meant to take the Zombies franchise further than it's ever gone before, featuring new objectives, 2 quest lines, and new ways for players to make their experience their own. Outbreak is an extremely successful experiment, but has some major flaws. There's the massive layout, the reuse of unused Blackout 2 and Firebomb Dirty Team maps, the failure to include Malware and Forsaken Wonder Weapons, and both main quests being fun but take over 2 hours to do, and have content that only feels like it's being added right at the end, and just when it feels like it's getting started, it's already over. Outbreak has a soft spot in my heart, and it has a ton of fun things to do, but being the only real content Cold War received for nearly 5 months, it didn't help us sour the experience in the long run. If the side objectives were touched up, and it was constantly updated, this could be a map and mode for the ages. Toten is easily my favorite map throughout the entirety of Cold War. Taking place in the heart of Berlin, the map features talking robots, the return of the Panzer Soldat, a fantastic main quest, and a wonder weapon that feels like an improved version of the Elemental Krakens from Voyage, but one that better matches the pace of the game. Alongside this, Malware features an expanded narrative that catches audiences up to speed with who Valentina is and the threat of the Forsaken if not stopped. What also makes the map a blast is the dynamic between the Requiem Strike team and the leaders of Omega, including Kravchenko, Jaeger, Gorod, and Peck. And then there's all those little goodies, including the music, atmosphere, progression, and overall fun factor. Toten is one of my favorite maps from this modern iteration of Zombies, and it's a fun time no matter how many times I run through it. In the grand finale to Cold War, Forsaken has a ton to balance on its plate, and in terms of narrative, I think it pulls it off quite well, while still being extremely charming with all of its side quests, arcade games, and music. Which, by the way, the sound team has carried Cold War on its back. Forsaken concludes the game's narrative with the titular monster being released, and he attempts to destroy the world. Now needing to team up, it's up to Requiem and Omega to subdue the threat before they're all killed. I love how the experience interweaves each of its plot lines, and the Crystalax is a one-of-a-kind wonder weapon that completely destroys the balance of the map, and needing it to slay a demigod is pretty cool. There are plenty of complaints, but the biggest one is the reuse locale from campaign, and the messy, chopped up way the map creates its sections. But for those along for the ride, Forsaken is a legitimately good conclusion that even has a few teases that keep you guessing. In a prequel to Cold War, Duran Fong, and subsequently Vanguard as a whole, is an inexcusable cash grab made with very few resources in an attempt to get more players to buy the game. Made in the style of Outbreak, Duran Fong is a semi-linear, open-world experience that has players complete objectives and open the space of Duran Fong in an effort to reunite with Gabriel Croft, the lead researcher who has investigated the Dark Ether and its entities. The coolest part of the map is Cortifex himself and the other Dark Ether entities. Cortifex is a Dark Ether god using the powers of Nazi Germany to further his own goals, and subsequently plunge our planet into darkness. Honestly, that's pretty cool. Duran Fong's main gameplay loop feels clunky, and progression is hardly rewarding. Easily one of the worst maps in the series, and that more falls upon the executives who requested it, rather than the developers who made it in 6 months. In their second map, Terra Maldicta manages to somehow be an equally unimpressive experience of Duran Fong. Taking place in Egypt, the map has players retrieve a piece of the Toma rituals and team up with a force known as the Decimator Shield to begin to defeat Cortifex. Terra Maldicta has very few positives to its name, and with one of them being that it has a wonder weapon, should do more than enough to explain why I feel that way. The map hardly uses this locale in an interesting way, and it's embarrassing that this game is sold for an even higher price than nearly every previous COD game. It's cool to visit the Dark Ether again, but it's completely inconsistent from the Cold War variant, and Zabala is an enemy so heavily nerfed she no longer feels like a threat to the player. Terra Maldicta is a mute entry that hardly feels as though it has a satisfying piece of content for players to enjoy and should be avoided at all cost. For being the first of 2 round-based maps, Shino Numa Reborn actually stands as a competent remake of the World at War original. Being the first of its iterations to actually feature a PAP machine, the map excels at being a fun, but honestly just serviceable time. It doesn't bring with it too many new innovations, nor was it really able to. The Wonderwaff is an outdated wonder weapon, and without any unique upgrades, it's passable at best, and fails to keep up in these faster and faster entries at its worst. The map looks visually stunning, but its gameplay barely makes up for it. And honestly, its most notable feature is referencing Alistair Rhodes in the Chaos storyline, which I feel says more than enough for its relevance. A perfectly fine map that proved Vanguard has what it takes to be a fun entry, but is nothing more than that. Fun. Coming at the end of Vanguard, the Archon is a map created out of necessity, a very by-the-numbers adventure that concludes the events of the game in the most lackluster way possible, and essentially being a round-based version of Terra Maldicta with few alterations wasn't helping either. The map's most impressive feature is Chord effects. He has a fully created model and boss fight, which most of the development time went into. It's an okay experience, and the quest itself is fun, but is this a premium experience? Absolutely not. And sadly feels like another slice of content meant to fill up a time slot. There's no unique wonder weapons, mechanics, or all that much that makes the experience exciting. I can't even say it's by the numbers because it does something that no other map has ever done: remaster a map that came out in the same game. Which is honestly a feat, that's for sure. So for MWZ, we're going to be covering the entire game in one fell swoop. Operation Deadbolt is an evolution on the Outbreak open world concept, and for what it's worth, it gets so much more right, but also so much more wrong. MWZ is a cohesive mess. You have the improved contract system, in-depth gameplay, and a ton of ways to work towards the late game, and it seems like it was constantly evolving. But what kills the game is its inability to balance its grind, and much of the content is locked behind long, repetitive games that feel like 5 steps forward, 4.8 steps back. The Aether Rifts and boss fights were a really cool concept, and Greylorm and the Entity were amazing, but they always felt like good first steps towards something new. Like, if we got 4 more raid bosses like Greylorm, that would be awesome, but the content drop-off is insane, just when it feels like it was gaining momentum too. It's a mixed product that does give you your money's worth, but it's way too much of a grind, hoping it's tried again in the future. After many long years, we've arrived at Terminus, the first map in our Black Ops 6 adventure. Because Terminus is so new, it's hard to predict how it'll define the DLC season of Black Ops 6 on its own. Terminus is a high-stakes adventure through the Project Jan's facility known as Terminus Island. The map's best feature is its Easter egg and boss fight. While it's nothing super impressive, it's an incredible return to form, and having 2 boss fights in multiple IGCs is the bar every map needs to shoot for. And then there's the Patient 13 boss fight, which is an absolute highlight. And of course, we have so many characters, like the return of the Requiem crew as dedicated characters, Raptor 1, William Peck, and Peck's assistant Maya, a new character who came to the island searching for her brother and is the emotional core of the map. Terminus is a fantastic experience, and with the reveal of Sentinel artifact at the end of its main quest, I'm super excited to see where it goes next. Liberty Falls, the bonus map included with Black Ops 6. Taking place in Liberty Falls, West Virginia, the map tells the story of a town overrun by undead caused by a Dark Ether incursion, most likely coming from Samantha Maxis. Sadly, much of this map's narrative is hardly explored, and being the only map with no canon crew, we get much of the story from Security Chief Blanchard and the scientist Panos. Sadly, Liberty Falls is a fun bonus map, but as the other half to Terminus' ongoing narrative, it ends just when it feels like it's getting started, which is a real shame. This can also be attributed to the fantastic intro cutscene, which at the time of this recording, this map does hardly anything with, and is what causes me to feel so let down. But as an experience, on par with Nuketown, The Giant, Classified, and Groston House, Liberty Falls more than rises to the occasion, but with a little more time and development, could have been seen as something more than just the camo grind map. Citadel Daymore is the third Black Ops 6 Zombies map. Taking place in Avalon, Citadel Daymore sees the return of Chaos storyline elements, Gabriel Croft, and Sergei Ravenov. The map excels at giving players a ton of unique tools to use, like the point of power circles, the incantations, and the bastard swords. but the map's biggest flaw is its weak and disconnected narrative, and at times it doesn't fully explore the world it sets up, with characters like Carver not even saying a word in either cutscene, and his best dialogue being reserved for a piece of intel. Then there are the swords, which range from okay to underwhelming, and would have benefited from a game with slower pacing. The Guardian is a fantastic boss fight, but the reveal of the amulet is frustrating and further extends the story for no reason. And finally, the map is rather small, and it's a shame that we don't explore the rest of the castle that can easily be seen by taking a chopper gunner. But overall, Citadel is a fun experience that sadly gets lost in the weeds. The Tomb is a rather weak COD Zombies entry. While it sports some incredible art design and level flow, the map doesn't benefit from a returning wonder weapon, enemy set, and perk. And the map is best described as a really well-made custom zombies experience, and I can understand that criticism. It doesn't help that the story elements are just confusing and underbaked to Citadel, and you have a map that looks gorgeous but lacks true substance. This is further compounded by the map's main quest, which is rather short, and none of the characters are further explored, once again stalling their character growth. Like, Peck isn't even on the map, and 50% of the intel is focused on Archibald, a man who was killed by a mimic. It also doesn't help that the returning Chaos storyline elements seem to compound and conflict with many of the Dark Aether's unique story elements. We also get contradictions for the Sentinel artifact and how it actually works, and overall, the experience can be very frustrating for longtime fans, especially in the narrative department. But overall, The Tomb is a fun experience, but it's held back by a limited scope and reused elements. Also, I have to shout out the gold armor. That thing is a really cool side quest. And that's every single Call of Duty Zombies map reviewed in 1 minute or less. This project was a ton of fun to work on, and it really had me explore my review style in a completely different fashion. But before we end out, I need to give a huge shout out to Funny Man, my editor, who has helped me with each of these shorts. I literally could not do this video without him, and it was my absolute pleasure to work with him throughout this entire series over the past couple of months. Seriously, go follow him, go hang out with him, go hire him, I don't care. He's a talented guy, he's great to work with, so lucky to have worked with him. If you like this video and my short form reviews, but wanted more, you should check out my other reviews of IW, AW, World War II, Cold War, MWZ, and my IW re-review. And if that's not your style, why not try checking out my History of Easter Egg Awards video? And for all of you at home, thank you so much for watching. And remember, keep on slaying.